Hello, this is Ray Johnson, your host for Instagram Christianity. I'm here with two of my lovely friends that decided to put up with me somehow after all these years from home. Although they are abroad at the moment, fancy. We have who I've dubbed Chocolate Thunder, and
Hello.
great backstory for that we may get into. And of course, our good friend Colin. So, who I have also named Peter Pan because he always had a chicken feather in his fedora. But these two lovely guys that are somehow friends with me have agreed to come on this podcast to give the male perspective of our age demographic, because previously, as you guys know, I interviewed Brent Hoggard and Tom Cox to get an older generational perspective, but now it's more for, as far as males, about our age to get that insight. So I'll start with you two. How, in these modern times, because I asked so many females that I've had on here about this, with social media and just at a glance, it's so easy on Instagram feeds, Snapchat, what have you, to see so many people that are fake that on Instagram may have in their bio, oh my gosh, John 3:16 or Philippians 4:6-7 or whatever. But then in real life, their feed didn't provoke a Christian lifestyle. Like they're partying all the time in an unbalanced way where that's clearly all they invest in, and things like that where it's not quite lining up with what they project their image to supposedly be. So I want to get your perspective on if you've seen that on social media and or a close friend of yours, obviously don't have to say a name, of just seeing that difference of advertising a better person than they actually are, at least attempting to be.
Yeah. I would say in my experience in general, I notice a lot of people definitely want to, and they want to embrace Christian values. Mm-hmm. They want to keep it as a sense of morality, but they're not really raised in a way that prioritizes Christianity at all. So what we call one day a week Christians, right? Or just on Sundays, right? Mm-hmm. And I notice that is unfortunately common, even within church. Obviously you're at church and they're all your one day a week Christians, and a lot of the time it's hard to even tell the difference. But it really just stems from a sense of priority where they let themselves be put in an environment where the world is the priority as opposed to God,
Mm-hmm. Personally, I am not a major, I'm not on social media a ton. I try not to consume a ton of social media. So whenever I do see something that seems to imply that they're a better Christian than what my opinion of them is, I just dismiss it all as, well, it's social media, so everything is fake on here, regardless of whether or not they're a genuine person or intentionally trying to put out that perception. I know personally, even though I don't use Instagram or Snapchat a ton, I'm not posting Bible verses all the time either. Probably people who know me will probably know I will probably start a theological conversation or debate. But that's not portrayed correctly on my social media either. My social media, you'll probably get stupid news and occasional fraud content.
Even you and I, as Christians who are, more than more than one day a week, right? We pursue God as a priority in our lives to the best of our ability. But I don't spend a lot of time on social media, probably more than Diedrich. I don't post a lot of things or anything like that. I rarely ever post anything publicly. Mm-hmm. But I also pretty much never am putting up Bible verses or Christian content. And part of that actually stems from exactly what he said about everything's fake, right? So I don't want to bother putting out all of this, Christian hubbub, right? I can't trust that people who see this are actually going to care or like believe that that's the way that I am.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason I also don't post a lot in general, is because I want people to meet me in person and judge my character based on who I really am rather than something I put online.
And I honestly respect that of both of you. I noticed for both the points you've made with the turn of phrase, one a day Christian, like attending once a week type of thing, as far as like meeting with God, not necessarily at a church, but just in general, relationship wise. And also with the fact of not being on social media a ton, with posting Christian content, much less in general. And for the first one, about one a day, one a week Christian thingamajig, I think it's interesting you brought that up in that exact phrase that you did, because with me growing up, and we all went to the same church, I noticed a lot of clickiness, especially getting older after a while, because everyone just knew each other. And I felt that because I could only physically attend church once a week, that I was kind of outcast in a way, as deemed as, oh, you're doing all these volunteer things and you're bettering your life with the good God has gifted you with all these talents. You're not as Christian because you're not up here Wednesday and Friday and however it worked, And,
sure, yeah.
That's a perception that needs to be more established as to not being a mindset of, oh, physically showing up in a community at church does not equate to, with attendance record, how close you are with God. It just means you just happen to be free to join other Christians that particular day. And the other thing about social media that I respect both you guys with, and honestly, if I weren't a film major and all these things where I'm like, have to be on social media, I probably wouldn't post it much either, honestly. If anything, I feel like a marketer at this point. But, if it weren't for those kinds of things and just silly, goofy life updates of, I'm a weirdo, I probably wouldn't be nearly as prevalent myself in being involved with YouTube and all these other fun outlets, like how this podcast is on YouTube. So, just taking those things into account, I think it's quite interesting from hearing from you guys' perspective, because I'm sure there's females that, like you, don't post as much, but it's just interesting. Most of the ones I've interacted with in this season have said how they're pretty prominent, whether they post a lot or just view their friends a lot. And I feel like y'all are more so the viewing other friends type of deal. So I think it's quite interesting in a good way.
Yeah, I would agree.
Is there a connection between how you see social media and how you felt that growing up in church was a social club? Are those connected to the two?
I mean, in a way, it was more just kind of if we had cutesy hangout group photos. And I think, Colin, you were in one of them before Stephanie moved away, different states, when we were in high school. But, those kind of moments where we'd post on Facebook and whatever. But our foundation of our friendship definitely was more old school, if you will, with just meeting through the church physically. I think as the social aspect, the media part of it wasn't as prevalent, unless it's just parents bragging about, oh my gosh, look what my kid did at church, and that kind of thing that everyone goes through, especially if they grow up in the church for that specifically. But I think definitely the social dynamic of it didn't also help. I went to a private school until 8th grade, where I met Megan, who kept me sane. And basically, there were a lot of fake girls there, and they weren't genuinely trying to be. It was their parents manipulating them and being like, you're in 7th grade. You should date my friend here, their son. And it's like, what are you going to do? Hold hands in the lunchroom and go to a movie with your parent 2 rows back? I mean, that's not dating. That's just cringe. And I even talked about that with my friends in my grade level at a track one time as we were warming up as everyone did it kind of curricular activity. I said to my 2 friends at the time, look, this is weird. And they looked at me and they're like, yeah, I don't know what these moms are doing. And then I find out later from my mom, they went to a public school and they probably married rich husbands. So it's like, okay, I'm connecting the dots. They want to better their children's lives, but they're doing it in an oddly weird way. There's like no way that these boys are going to really think romantically about a girl quite yet in that age. They might have a crush on them or think they're cute, but definitely not the maturity of, beginnings of high school with thinking about girls and all that sort of thing. It's just very strange. And my mom, as a result, was pretty outcasted too, because they made themselves out to be better than her. It's like, but you all went to a public school, though, in different places. Like, just because you married rich and, 2008 didn't affect you because we were in retirement insurance doesn't mean that you're better. And they also were threatened by our intelligence. And I got bullied by a teacher in 6th grade. So it's a whole thing where it's like, just that constant feeling of feeling on the outskirts of certain communities, despite how there's some good apples, but overall just the environment and vibe was like, you're different, therefore you're strange. So I know I'm crazy and strange, but don't make me feel it more than I already do.
I see how feeling that way, and it's included in the church, could make you question Christianity, because we're supposed to be known for how we treat each other, how we love each other. Mm-hmm. Having the same experience that you have in the not-so-Christian place.
Yeah, I dubbed it Not Really Christian Academy when I left.
I was trying not to make that reference. And it being passed over to the place where you're supposed to have those connections, the bonding as brothers and sisters in Christ. Mm-hmm. I can see how that was tough to go through. So
the staff at the school was great. It was just the moms being weird about their kids. I'm like, this is not a soap opera. Chill out.
One of the things about Christian schools is that most everyone that I know of, and I won't say all of them, but most everyone that I know of is very much a school first and a Christian community second. Mm-hmm. And so, right, like the idea behind having a Christian school is to have kids raised with Christ as a part of every aspect of their life, right? Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be like you are surrounded by good Christian fellowship for, the majority of your life, right? So the majority of the things that you're doing and the productivity that you have going on. But most of the time, it's just like, we have a set of rules, we have a set of values, but like do your homework and make friends, and it's very much just the same as another school, when it's not about Christ first, right? Mm-hmm. So I've
get that.
Yeah. I've seen schools where it's more like, in the example, I mean, like, T and I were homeschooled, so, at least, and I was homeschooled for the entirety of my, schooling up through high school. Mm. It was very much at home all the time up until high school, when I was able to do more co-op classes with other homeschool groups and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it was obviously not social, but at the same time, I was raised with in my household, right? Mm-hmm. And most of my friends as well were made at church, and at church, it's very much Christ first and community second, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But it is a focus on having a Christian body of the church you're supposed to have fellowship with, specifically to grow your relationships with God.
Priority is Christ first, community second, or that was your experience, that it felt like it was Christ first?
To be fully transparent, my early experience with church was nothing like that. It wasn't a very good experience at all.
Either. Okay.
A little bit, if you. But I would say in general, I would say should be very much Christ and community as a whole, right? So that bonds through Christ and for. So yes, you make friends, and yes, you can do more than just church together and things like that. But at the same time, it's a place where you find accountability, and you find teaching, and you find better ways to pursue God personally, as well as in a group and what have you.
It's interesting you state that, because it made me think on how my college, High Point University, I always make the joke that our president Nito is going to turn the whole city of High Point to the campus, and quite frankly, he's not that far off from it. But it's very much a bubble. And with you stating what you had about the church and how it should be in the community, it also feels like it's very much a bubble. And the only exceptions to those bubbles are when we do mission trips, whether they're just down the street or internationally or wherever, and whomever we converse with. And that only seems to be, as far as advertising missions trips, once a year of like a huge event surrounding it. So most of the year, it comes across as, with certain churches, definitely not all, and they seem, as far as marketing themselves, if you will, very far and few between, where most churches come across as, we have this established bubble of Christ, and despite what Christ's whole purpose and teaching is, they're thinking, well, you're not part of our group, so maybe just go to another church. Or maybe because you don't have a certain wealth bracket, go to a church that's not here. And, you're supposed to dress a certain way and present yourself to God in a certain fancy attire, which most of the people he talked with when he was roaming the earth for 33 years definitely didn't have those Southern Lady Baptist hats and all these fancy clothing, especially the ones he knew needed him. So I just think it's interesting how some people, whether, like when I talked to Jason earlier on in the season, with him growing up in a Catholic community and that kind of boarding school setup, where it's very much regimented and a sense of status has to be obtained in order to get to Christ, and using that as a way to have some sort of control over people so they feel better about themselves. And that goes against what Christ is saying. He's saying, well, the whole point is that you don't have control and that I'm here to save you, because you clearly can't be left to your own devices, So.
Right. The whole idea of the community of Christ is to come as you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the best way to advocate church, because it's not about joining a church to be at a church or to go to church ever. It is to a place where you can learn to pursue Christ, or you can find Christ there. Right. So if you are unsaved and you want to learn more, you go to the church to learn about Christ, not to learn about the church, to meet, friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's secondary. Mm-hmm.
It's very much
that.
Sorry.
I said I'll echo that. The goal of Christians is to glorify God, and you do that by going with other Christians and learning how to study God.
Right.
And going alongside of other people and growing and glorifying God more and more, because that's what He commands, and that's the best way to glorify His people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say another point that's on my mind is the idea that church is very, very often a checkbox. This goes hand with the one-day-a-week Christian, right, where they define their good person reward based on whether or not certain things. But at the same time, even in general, especially with kids growing up in church, if their family, if their parents aren't leading them the wrong way towards Christ, then like in my early church experience, we go to church Sunday, and I did my high school class. My parents went to the service. I was there for about an hour, and then we'd leave. We'd go home. That was about it. We didn't really talk about it. I wasn't put towards it like very strongly, right? Because we only went on Sunday. It's all basically the same. Doesn't got. It was very
as a consumer product.
What's that?
That's church as a consumer.
Yeah, more of just the societal expectation of being in the Bible Belt, having to go to church kind of deal. Yeah.
My priority wasn't what I was learning. It wasn't even who I was talking to.
Yeah.
Right.
My current college leader, his name is Jace, has been talking to us as the college ministry. We've got a lot of work to do about what the role of the church is as a whole, and as us as this individual part of the ministry of the church. The church as a whole is starting to talk about that as well. Our goal here is not to just come and consume, just go to church. We're supposed to know the people to your left and to your right. We're supposed to serve, help each other. That's how we're supposed to know each other as Christians. How are you supposed to, for other people, are supposed to look in and see that you're a Christian if you're not loving, helping your community around you. Like for me, that's helping out with food pantry, get to know the people there. For me, it's because the stuff that's happening in their lives, their children and their health, it's just serving and getting connected and involved, serving and getting connected and involved with other people. And that's your community, and that's your the church is. Other church is a Presbyterian church, and they're very much involved in the same thing. It's got hundreds of 200 people in it, and since it's smaller, and Presbyterians and Baptists, they're very involved churches. And they pray, like the prayer request for the whole church, they pray Sunday morning out loud to everyone. So everyone knows everything.
Yeah.
Couple steps that you can go to kind of take a step out of the consumerism mindset or the consumerism.
Very true. I'm sure that we could expand upon these points a lot more, but for closing thoughts, I wanted to ask you guys, especially because I asked my friend Peter, and then I briefly already mentioned Jason. Peter didn't quite say, at least that I can recall, what his background was church-wise of a specific, what I call, genre of Christian. Jason definitely was Catholic with how he was raised. But since we're all Baptist as far as the church we went to, at least, growing up in that environment, where how we all met and so forth, from a guy's perspective on going to church just in general, but especially with the Baptist ideals of, fully immersion for when you get baptized and saved and those kinds of rituals, how would you say in these modern times do you attempt to, with such a comparison, look at me culture we're in, basically just 2.0 of the 90s of like it's all about me and independence? What would you say as a guy in the church and just in our, early 20s and so forth, navigating through life and the church and trying to balance it where you feel you're doing justice, your walk with God in the best way you can? I mean, no one's perfect. Thankfully, I know I'm not. Like, I could not be God. I'd be a lot more vindictive. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, answer is short and sweet. Live and learn. Join the Presbyterians.
Rally cry for all Presbyterians.
You know what? That could be misconstrued because there's a lot of things happening in the PCA church. I mentioned OPC and Orthodox Presbyterian. That's all I acknowledge. You're not stuck in your culture. You're not stuck in where you want to go. You're not stuck anywhere. And there are always people around you who genuinely follow God. And so while we joke and make fun of like the Baptist culture, we're not their culture. We're Christians. So if there's something you disagree with, feel free to disagree with it. Do. And find people of like mind. Or correction, it's more of follow after Christ, and you'll naturally go towards people who are following after Christ in the same way that you are. Being friends of some Pentecostals, which is the other side of the way. They're falling after Christ as far as they can, and finding, and in that they're attracting other people who fall after Christ in the same way, whether it's praying for people and healing and the ways that they worship, compared to me, who has a hard time falling after Christ in that same way, or in that same mindset, who has gone closer to the Orthodoxy, Reformed view, loving people and following Christ in their way, not starting to lean towards them. So, and that as a man in the Jew culture, I would say you're not stuck. There are people following Christ the same way that you are. You just have to keep going and find them, because you will find them, and the Lord will put them in your life.
Preach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much. It's easily forgotten, but Christianity is a very relationship with God. From a culture, it's not about, right? It's about pursuit of Christ.
That was very well said, and I'm so glad that you guys had the chance, despite being all the way up in the, maple syrup land, you guys took time to converse with me, and very insightful from both of you, and I'm blessed that I've met you as soon as I did in life, and that we've still kept up despite how crazy busy we all respectively are. So I want to thank you guys again, and audience, please stay tuned for the closing episode 10, where I interview my mom, and then I'll have a recap episode for 11. So until then, and thanks for listening, and hope that this helps you in your journey, whether you're a Christian or not, of realizing just how crazy it is for all of us in these times. Thank you.